The marriage certificate felt heavier than paper should. Min Soo-jin stared at the elegant calligraphy spelling out her fate, Mrs. Park Jae-wook, while her father's trembling signature dried beside her own. At 20, she had imagined many futures for herself. None included becoming the wife of a man older than her father. Chairman Park sat across the mahogany table, his presence commanding even in silence. Silver threads wove through his black hair, and his dark eyes held decades of calculated decisions. He wore his 55 years with the confidence of someone who had never heard the word no, until today, perhaps, when he'd agreed to this arrangement. "The terms are clear," he said, his voice carrying the weight of boardroom authority. "You'll live in the penthouse. Your family's debts will be cleared immediately. In return, you'll fulfill the duties of a wife in public appearances only." Soo-jin's mother squeezed her hand beneath the table, a silent reminder of the medical bills, the failing restaurant, the loan sharks who had started visiting their neighborhood. Her younger brother's university tuition hung in the balance. "I understand," Soo-jin whispered, though understanding and accepting were different beasts entirely. The lawyers shuffled papers with practiced efficiency. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Park Industries' executive suite, Seoul stretched endlessly, its lights beginning to twinkle in the approaching dusk. Somewhere in that vast city, her friends were probably studying for finals, worrying about part-time jobs, planning weekend dates with boys their own age. Chairman Park's phone buzzed. He answered with crisp professionalism, discussing stock prices and merger details as if he hadn't just acquired a wife along with his other daily transactions. When the call ended, he looked at her directly for the first time. "The car will collect you tomorrow at 9. Pack light. Everything you need will be provided." Soo-jin nodded, sealing her fate with the simple gesture. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of Gangnam's most exclusive tower. Soo-jin had seen luxury in magazines and dramas, but experiencing it felt surreal. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers, and every surface gleamed with expensive perfection. The space could house 10 families comfortably, yet it felt hollow. Mrs. Kim, the head housekeeper, guided her through rooms that seemed designed for photography rather than living. "The chairman's study is off limits," she explained with professional courtesy. "Your quarters are in the East Wing. Meals are served at 7, 1, and 7. The chairman prefers punctuality." Soo-jin's bedroom was larger than her family's entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated the space, draped in silk the color of winter sky. The walk-in closet held designer clothes in her exact size. Someone had done their research thoroughly. Through the panoramic windows, Seoul sprawled below like a circuit board, pulsing with life she was no longer part of. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends asking about her sudden disappearance from university. She'd crafted careful lies about a family emergency, unable to explain the truth. That evening, dinner was served in a dining room that could seat 20. Chairman Park sat at the head of the table, reading financial reports while eating. Soo-jin picked at her perfectly prepared meal, the silence stretching between them like an ocean. "You don't need to be afraid," he said suddenly, not looking up from his papers. "I'm not afraid," she replied, though her voice betrayed her. He set down his documents and studied her face. "This arrangement benefits us both. I need a wife for social obligations. You need financial security. It's business." The word business hung in the air like a verdict. Soo-jin nodded, understanding that in his world, even marriage could be reduced to profit margins and strategic advantages. The charity gala was Soo-jin's debut as Mrs. Park. She wore a midnight blue gown that cost more than her father's annual income, her hair styled by professionals who spoke in reverent whispers about Chairman Park's mysterious new wife. "Remember," he said as their car approached the hotel, "we've been married 3 months. We met through mutual friends. Keep your answers brief and smile often." The ballroom glittered with Seoul's elite. Soo-jin recognized faces from business magazines and society pages, people who moved in circles where her family's entire existence wouldn't register as a footnote. Chairman Park's hand rested lightly on her lower back as he guided her through the crowd, a gesture that appeared intimate but felt purely transactional. Jae-wook! A silver-haired woman approached with calculating eyes. You've been hiding this beautiful wife from us. Mrs. Choi, may I present Soo-jin? He replied smoothly. Darling, Mrs. Choi chairs the hospital foundation. Soo-jin smiled and bowed appropriately, playing her role while conversations swirled around her in languages of power and privilege she was still learning. The women assessed her with sharp gazes, searching for weaknesses or advantages. The men treated her as an extension of Chairman Park's success, beautiful, young, and silent. During dinner, she watched her husband work the room with masterful precision. Every handshake, every laugh, every strategic pause served a purpose. She began to understand why he needed a wife, not for companionship, but as another tool in his arsenal of influence. You did well tonight, he said during the drive home. It was the closest thing to praise she'd received, and despite herself, Soo-jin felt a small spark of satisfaction. Perhaps she could learn to navigate this world after all. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Soo-jin discovered Chairman Park's insomnia. She'd woken at 2 a.m. to find the penthouse's main lights still glowing. Following the sound of quiet conversation, she found him on the terrace, phone pressed to his ear, conducting business with markets on the other side of the world. He wore only a white dress shirt and dark trousers, his usual armor of expensive suits abandoned. In the moonlight, he looked less like an untouchable billionaire and more like a man carrying invisible weights. Seoul's numbers are down 3%, he was saying. I want a full analysis by morning. Soo-jin retreated to the kitchen, making tea from habit more than thirst. Her mother had always said warm milk helped with sleepless nights, but somehow she doubted Chairman Park was the warm milk type. When she emerged with 2 cups of jasmine tea, he was ending his call. He looked surprised to see her, then wary, as if kindness might be another form of manipulation he needed to decode. You don't sleep much, she observed, offering him a cup. Sleep is inefficient, he replied, but accepted the tea. Why are you awake? Old habits. I used to help my mother with early morning prep at the restaurant. They stood in comfortable silence, Seoul's lights twinkling below them like fallen stars. For a moment, the careful distance between them felt less like a chasm and more like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Your family's restaurant, he said eventually. What kind of food? Traditional Korean. Nothing fancy, but my mother's kimchi jjigae could make people cry with happiness. Something shifted in his expression, so briefly she might have imagined it. I haven't had homemade kimchi jjigae in 20 years. The admission hung between them, surprisingly vulnerable. Soo-jin's fever spiked during the night, leaving her shivering despite the penthouse's perfect climate control. She'd been fighting the cold for days, unwilling to show weakness in her new role. But her body had other plans. Mrs. Kim found her the next morning, barely conscious and burning with fever. Within an hour, Chairman Park's personal physician was examining her while she drifted in and out of awareness. Exhaustion and stress, Dr. Lee explained to someone whose voice sounded concerned. Her immune system is compromised. She needs rest and monitoring. When Soo-jin next opened her eyes, the room was dimmed, and someone sat in the chair beside her bed. Chairman Park looked up from his laptop, his usual commanding presence softened by worry. How long? She whispered, her throat raw. 2 days. You've been in and out. He closed the laptop and leaned forward. Dr. Lee says you haven't been eating properly. I'm fine. She started to protest, but he held up a hand. You're not fine. And you're not required to pretend otherwise when we're alone. Mrs. Kim appeared with a tray of congee and herbal tea. To Soo-jin's surprise, Chairman Park dismissed the housekeeper and picked up the spoon himself. "I can feed myself," Soo-jin protested weakly. "Your hands are shaking," he replied matter-of-factly. "This is practical, not pity." But as he carefully spooned the warm rice porridge between her lips, his touch was gentle in a way that had nothing to do with practicality. When she dozed off again, she felt a cool hand checking her forehead and heard him speaking quietly to Dr. Lee about adjusting her medication. For the first time since their marriage, Soo-jin felt cared for rather than simply maintained. Recovery brought unexpected revelations. Chairman Park worked from home while she recuperated, his usual office meetings replaced by video conferences in his study. Sometimes she caught glimpses of him through the partially open door. Sleeves rolled up, hair slightly mussed, looking more human than the polished executive she'd married. "You don't have to stay," she told him one afternoon when she found him reading in the living room instead of his study. "The acoustics are better here for international calls," he replied without looking up from his financial reports. It was a lie. His study was soundproofed and equipped with professional-grade communication equipment. But Soo-jin didn't challenge him, sensing that admitting concern might embarrass them both. That evening, she ventured to the kitchen to make tea and found him there first, staring into the refrigerator with the lost expression of someone unaccustomed to feeding himself. "Mrs. Kim has the evening off," he explained, as if caught in some shameful act. "I could cook," Soo-jin offered. "If you don't mind simple food." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that." She prepared kimchi fried rice with ingredients Mrs. Kim had stocked. Nothing fancy, but the familiar motions of cooking felt like meditation. Chairman Park sat at the kitchen island, watching her work with curious attention. "You're very efficient," he observed. "Years of practice. Our restaurant was always busy." "Tell me about it." So she did, describing the cramped kitchen where she'd learned to cook, the regular customers who became like family, the way her mother's face lit up when someone complimented her recipes. He listened without interruption, asking occasional questions that showed he was truly paying attention. When she served the simple meal, he ate every bite with what seemed like genuine appreciation. The business dinner was supposed to be routine, another evening of playing the perfect wife while Chairman Park negotiated deals with Japanese investors. But the restaurant's rooftop terrace offered an unexpected view of Seoul's skyline as the sun began to set. Soo-jin stood at the railing while the men discussed shipping contracts and market projections. The sky transformed from blue to gold to deep orange, painting the city in warm light that made even the concrete and steel look beautiful. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Chairman Park appeared beside her, having stepped away from the negotiations. "I've never seen Seoul from this angle," she admitted. "It's different up here, more hopeful." He studied her profile in the golden light. "You sound surprised." "I am. I thought I knew this city, but I only knew my small corner of it." "And now?" She considered the question seriously. "Now I'm learning there are many versions of the same place, many ways to see the same thing." Something in her words seemed to resonate with him. When she turned to meet his gaze, she found him watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. Not the calculating look of a businessman, but something warmer and more uncertain. "Soo-jin," he said quietly, and her name sounded different in his voice. Less formal, more personal. The moment stretched between them, filled with possibilities neither had dared to acknowledge. The setting sun painted them both in golden light, and for the first time since their marriage, the distance between them felt bridgeable. Then his phone rang, shattering the spell. He answered with his usual professional efficiency, but when he looked at her again, something fundamental had shifted. The sunset had changed everything, and they both knew it. The change was subtle but undeniable. Chairman Park began joining her for breakfast instead of eating alone in his study. Their conversations evolved from polite exchanges to genuine discussions about books, current events, and her observations about the city from their penthouse perch. "You see things differently," he told her one morning over coffee. "Most people in our social circle have similar perspectives. It's refreshing." Soo-jin felt a dangerous warmth at his words. Different isn't always better. In this case, it is. She was learning to read his expressions, the slight softening around his eyes when he was genuinely amused, the way his shoulders relaxed when he forgot to maintain his executive posture. These small intimacies felt more significant than any grand gesture. Their public appearances became easier as they developed a natural rhythm. At a gallery opening, she caught him smiling at something she'd whispered about the pretentious art critic holding court near the sculptures. At a business dinner, he included her in conversations instead of expecting her to remain decoratively silent. "People are talking," Mrs. Kim mentioned while arranging flowers in the main living area. "About what?" Soo-jin asked, though she suspected she knew. "They say the chairman seems different, happier." The older woman's expression was carefully neutral, but her tone suggested approval. That evening, Soo-jin found Chairman Park on the terrace again, but this time, he wasn't on a business call. He stood at the railing, simply watching the city lights flicker to life. "Couldn't sleep again?" she asked, joining him. "I wasn't trying to sleep. I was thinking." "About business?" He turned to look at her, and in the soft light from the penthouse, his expression was unguarded. "About you." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. The photograph fell from Chairman Park's jacket pocket as Soo-jin hung up his coat, a candid shot of a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. When she handed it to him that evening, his entire demeanor shifted. "My first wife," he said quietly, holding the worn photo with careful reverence. "Min Jung." Soo-jin had known he'd been married before, but the business magazines never mentioned details. "She was beautiful. She was everything good in the world." His voice carried 20 years of grief. "We were college sweethearts, married young, poor, ridiculously happy. She died in a car accident when I was 35. The revelation explained so much: his emotional distance, his focus on business, the way he'd structured their marriage like a contract rather than a relationship. "I'm sorry," Soo-jin said, meaning it completely. "After she died, I threw myself into building the company. Success became my only goal because it was the only thing that didn't hurt." He looked at the photograph again. "I never expected to feel anything for anyone again." The implication in his words made Soo-jin's heart race. "And now?" He met her eyes directly. "Now I'm terrified because I do feel something. For you." The confession hung between them like a fragile thing that could shatter with the wrong word or gesture. Soo-jin understood now why he'd kept his distance, not from coldness, but from fear of betraying a memory he'd held sacred for decades. "Min Jung wouldn't want you to stop living," she said gently. "How can you be sure?" "Because she loved you, and people who truly love want happiness for the ones they leave behind." He studied her face as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "When did you become so wise?" "When I learned that survival sometimes requires understanding other people's pain." The charity auction was in full swing when Soo-jin excused herself to the ladies' room, needing a moment away from the glittering crowd and careful conversations. She was touching up her lipstick when Mrs. Choi entered with 2 other society women, their voices carrying the sharp edge of gossip. "Of course it's not a real marriage," Mrs. Choi was saying. "Look at the age difference. She's obviously a gold digger who got lucky." "I heard her family was drowning in debt," another woman added. "Jae-wook probably bought her like he buys everything else. Such a shame. Min Jung was perfect for him. This girl is just a pretty placeholder." Soo-jin stood frozen in the stall, their words cutting deeper than she'd expected. When they finally left, she stared at her reflection in the mirror, seeing herself through their eyes, young, naive, out of place in this world of inherited privilege and calculated alliances. She returned to the ballroom with a practiced smile, but Chairman Park noticed her changed demeanor immediately. During the drive home, he finally asked what was wrong. "Nothing," she said, staring out the window at the city lights. "Soo-jin." The gentle way he said her name broke her resolve. "They think I'm a gold digger, a replacement for someone I could never measure up to." His jaw tightened. "Who said that?" "It doesn't matter. They're not wrong about the money, are they? My family needed saving, and you needed a wife. It's exactly what they think it is." "Is that what you think?" She turned to face him, seeing her own confusion reflected in his dark eyes. "I don't know what to think anymore. This was supposed to be simple." "Nothing about this has been simple," he admitted. "Not since that sunset." The car pulled into their building's garage, but neither moved to get out. The confined space felt charged with everything they'd been avoiding. "What are we doing, Jae-wook?" she whispered, using his given name for the first time. "Something dangerous," he replied, reaching out to touch her face. "Something that could ruin everything we agreed to." The storm hit Seoul with unexpected fury, trapping them in the penthouse as rain lashed the floor-to-ceiling windows and thunder shook the building's steel frame. The power flickered twice before settling, leaving them in the soft glow of emergency lighting. Soo-jin found Chairman Park Jae-wook in his study, but instead of working, he stood at the window watching the lightning illuminate the city in stark, dramatic flashes. "The backup generators will maintain essential systems," he said without turning around. "We'll be comfortable." "I'm not worried about the power," she replied, moving to stand beside him. "What are you worried about?" The question hung between them as another flash of lightning revealed the intensity in his expression. They'd been circling this moment for weeks, drawn together by forces neither fully understood nor could control. "Us," she admitted. "What we're becoming." He turned to face her fully, and in the storm's intermittent light, she saw the careful control he'd maintained for weeks finally cracking. "I've been trying to convince myself this is still just an arrangement," he said quietly. "That what I feel for you is gratitude or convenience or anything other than what it actually is." "What is it actually?" "Love," he said simply. "Terrifying, impossible, completely inappropriate love." The word hung between them like a confession and a question. Soo-jin felt her heart racing as she processed the magnitude of what he'd just admitted. "The age difference," she started, "doesn't matter. The circumstances of our marriage don't matter. Your first wife would want me to be happy." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You make me happy, Soo-jin. You make me feel alive again." When he reached out to cup her face in his hands, she didn't pull away. When he leaned down to kiss her, she rose to meet him. The kiss was gentle at first, then deeper as 20 years of emotional walls finally crumbled. Morning brought clarity and complications in equal measure. Soo-jin woke in Jae-wook's arms, their night together having transformed everything between them. The storm had passed, leaving Seoul washed clean and gleaming in the early sunlight. "No regrets?" he asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "None," she replied, meaning it completely. "You? Only that it took us so long to get here." But reality intruded with the arrival of Mrs. Kim and the return of their carefully structured world. At breakfast, they maintained their usual polite distance, though Soo-jin caught Jae-wook's eyes lingering on her with new warmth. The day brought its own challenges. A business crisis required Jae-wook's immediate attention, pulling him into back-to-back meetings and emergency calls. Soo-jin used the time to visit her family, needing to ground herself in familiar faces and simple truths. "You look different," her mother observed, as they prepared lunch together in the small restaurant kitchen. "Happier." "Do I?" "Like a woman who's found her place in the world." Soo-jin considered this as she chopped vegetables with practiced efficiency. Had she found her place? The penthouse still felt surreal, the society event still required careful navigation, but something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer just playing a role, she was building a life. "Is it possible to love someone you married for practical reasons?" she asked her mother. "Love grows where it's tended," her mother replied wisely. "The soil doesn't matter as much as the care." That evening, Jae-wook returned home exhausted but relieved. The crisis had been resolved without major losses. He found Soo-jin in the kitchen, making the kimchi jjigae he'd mentioned missing. "Welcome home," she said, and the words felt natural, right. "It is," he replied, pulling her into his arms. "For the first time in 20 years, it really is." The board meeting was supposed to be routine until Director Yoon raised concerns about Chairman Park's personal decisions affecting company image. The thinly veiled reference to his marriage sparked a tension that filled the conference room like smoke. Some shareholders questioned the appropriateness of recent changes in leadership's personal life, Director Yoon continued, his tone carefully neutral, but his meaning clear. Jae-wook's expression remained impassive, but Soo-jin, watching from the outer office through glass walls, could see the subtle tightening around his eyes. She'd insisted on accompanying him to work that day, wanting to understand his world better. "My personal life has no bearing on my ability to lead this company," Jae-wook replied evenly. "Our quarterly profits speak for themselves." "Of course, Chairman Park, but perception matters in business relationships, particularly with our more traditional partners." After the meeting, Jae-wook found Soo-jin in his office, staring out at the Seoul skyline with troubled eyes. "You heard," he said, not really a question. "I'm causing problems for you." "You're not causing anything. Small minds create their own problems." But Soo-jin had been thinking about this possibility for weeks. "What if they're right? What if I'm not good for your business?" He moved to stand behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "Do you know what I was before you? Successful, yes. Wealthy, certainly. But I was also empty. I built an empire but forgot how to live in it. And now? Now I remember why success matters. Not for its own sake, but for what it can protect and provide. You've given me something worth protecting again." She turned in his arms, seeing the certainty in his expression. "The board might not see it that way. Then they'll learn to. I didn't build this company to be ruled by other people's prejudices." That evening, they attended a company dinner where Soo-jin noticed the subtle shifts in how people treated them, some with newfound respect for their obvious happiness, others with barely concealed disapproval. But Jae-wook's confidence was unwavering, his pride in their relationship clear to anyone watching. 1 year after their wedding, Soo-jin stood on the same rooftop terrace where everything had changed, watching another sunset paint Seoul in golden light. But this time, she wasn't alone with her thoughts. Jae-wook joined her at the railing, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "Remembering something?" "Everything," she replied, leaning back against his chest. "A year ago, I thought my life was ending. I was so angry about the arrangement, so scared of losing myself. And now? Now I understand that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places." The past year had brought challenges, board resistance, social gossip, the constant navigation of their age difference in public spaces. But it had also brought joy she'd never imagined possible. Jae-wook had supported her return to university, encouraged her writing, and slowly introduced changes to his business practices that reflected their shared values. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold band, elegant in its understated beauty. "We had a contract," he said softly. "Now I'd like to have a marriage, a real one, built on choice rather than necessity." Soo-jin felt tears gathering as she looked at the ring. "Are you proposing to your own wife?" "I'm proposing to the woman I love, asking her to choose me not because she has to, but because she wants to. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, absolutely yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger beside the original wedding band, the sun completed its descent behind Seoul's skyline. But unlike that first sunset that had shattered their careful distance, this one felt like a beginning rather than an ending. They'd started as strangers bound by necessity, but they'd become something neither had dared to hope for. Partners, lovers, and finally, truly married in every sense that mattered. The city lights began to twinkle below them, and Soo-jin realized she was no longer looking at Seoul from the outside. She belonged here now, not because of money or arrangement, but because she'd found her home in the most unexpected place of all, in the heart of a man who'd forgotten how to love until she reminded him.